in the top.
There we
Yeah, we're
go.
live now.
Live. That's
Yeah.
confusing. It says you're in the show the whole time. Gonçalo, welcome to Todoist Office Hours, your first appearance on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So maybe introduce myself to start.
That's a great way to start. Yeah.
So my name is Gonçalo. I'm CTO at Doist. I'm located in Porto, Portugal. I'm currently connecting from a soundproof room that we have here from our abandoned tiny co-working space. So yeah, that's my environment. Hi, Chase.
Perfect. Yeah, good to see you. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
I'll do a quick description as well. So Chase Warrington, I'm the head of business development here at Doist. I'm in Valencia, Spain. So I'm not from here, but I live here in Spain. We're Iberian Peninsula neighbors here. And I'm here at my co-working and nice white and yellow background here behind me. So excited to have Gonçalo on the show. We don't get to catch up that often. We work on two different sides of the company, kind of. So it's great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. It's kind of incredible how much work we do together without actually seeing that much face to face. So
yeah. It is. It's part of our asynchronous ethos,
absolutely.
But then it makes it that much sweeter when we actually do get together. So
yeah.
So great. Well, thanks again for joining us. As you know, we're doing a productivity method series here on Todoist Office Hours, and you happen to be a frog eater. So we're going to introduce this. I think a great place to start is just like super broad. Can you describe for us what the Eat the Frog method is in its most basic form?
Yeah. So the Eat the Frog method at its most basic form is about taking the hardest, biggest task you have for the day and just doing that first before anything else. So it's kind of like about getting that out of the way so that then it becomes, honestly, you've already done the most important thing and it's easier to do almost anything else, right? So that's why it's called Eat the Frog. And if you have multiple frogs to eat, you should start with the biggest, nastiest one. So that's actually what I do. So I do the Eat the Frog version with more than one big chunk task. So yeah, I mean, on a high level, that's it.
So like the idea is that the frog, like obviously it's not super exciting to think about eating a frog, but the idea is like you get your day started and the first thing you do is you tackle that big, hairy, nasty task that you're not really that excited about having to do, but you go ahead and get it out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm really excited about the frog, let's say. So I think it's more about figuring out what is the real number one priority for me in that day and doing that. Sometimes it's not the most exciting thing on the list, but oftentimes it is actually. So it's more about fighting the kind of like the tendency we might have to start the day, with the small stuff or the communication or email or twist or whatever else we're going to do. Because something that I've found out over time is that if I begin with that, then often I won't actually get to the big, hairy task, right? Because you can get busy all day in email and twist. I mean, especially in a role like mine, there's a lot of communication. So if I go in, it's harder to get out. Sometimes I'll spend some energy and then I'm already, kind of tired. So the big task, stays there, gets postponed to the next day. So really getting in and starting with that has been, it's really effective. Those are by far my best days when I stick to the schedule.
Yeah. Do you think this is a good method for somebody that struggles with procrastination?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's also it's also very easy to manage, right? Like a lot of productivity methods are kind of complex. They force you to organize in a specific way, or there's a lot of moving parts. And this one is really, just take one. What is your P1? Do that first. That's it. Pat yourself in the back. That was a great day. Of course, you can take it further, and I do. Actually, I try to work with 3. So there's a P1, P2, and P3, and then everything else. But I literally, if I get to the end of the day and I've done those, I'll be very happy, even if everything else fell through the cracks. So it's an amazing system. It's amazingly simple, right? Like take 1, 2, maybe 3 things, and that's it. Those are the frogs. Start with those.
It's a very cool method because I feel like it kind of sets you up for success. I think you tend to work better when you're in like a positive mentality. And if you've already knocked out if you've eaten your big frog for the day, then I feel like you've kind of set yourself up for success throughout the rest of the day. I don't know if that makes sense or if you would agree.
Oh, it's absolutely true because, something that sometimes happens, especially I would say in management roles, you sometimes can get to the end of the day and think, what did I do today? And then be a little more empty-handed than maybe, when I was coding more often back in the day. So since I get that P1 out of the list first, I can definitely hold on to that and said, I did this, right? That's done. And it was hairy in some meaningful way, and it's done. It's behind us. So it definitely plays into your motivation, for sure.
Yeah. And like you said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that another thing that I think it's really, really cool is that it forces you to be honest about your priorities, because by the end of each day, I generally figure out what's the P1 for tomorrow. So I have to go through the list and pick one. And it's just one. Can't be 2, 3, 4. I mean, I did say I use 3, but they are also ordered. So I need to pick which one is the P1, which one is the P2, and so on. So honestly, it also brings clarity into my work, because we all have big to-do lists, a lot of things to do. But the exercise of figuring out what's the most important thing right now and what's the second most important thing right now and so on, I also think it really helps us have more impact and generally just be more in control of how we're spending our energy.
How do you select that? I mean, I'm sure every frog has a different shape or whatever phrase we want to use there. But like, I mean, how do you choose? Is it based on unblocking others or like impact or urgency? Like, how do you create those priorities?
I try as best as I can to not fall prey to the urgency side of things. Like, it's very easy to just tackle all the urgent things first, but then you don't really get to the important things first. So I kind of like, and we have a great blog post on this, by the way. I kind of like try to pick important things. If they're urgent, great, but also make sure that they're always important. And what do I mean by important? You mentioned unblocking others. That's obviously super important, right? Like it's a compounding effect if you can do something and unblock others to do their work. Another one are things that are maybe really core to the role. Like in my case, whenever there's something about let's say our engineering strategy or some really big piece that can have an impact for the rest of the year, or maybe even just a quarter, I will try to prioritize that to bring that clarity into what we're doing. So I think it's a mix of things. I don't use a very structured system to pick the kind of like these priorities, but I think, what you highlighted are just really great heuristics to kind of like make these decisions.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's really helpful to think about, because like you said, we can all get trapped in like email, or for us it's Twist, for somebody else maybe it's Slack or whatever messaging system you're using with your teammates. Your phone, like there's a million things trying to grab our attention, and it can be so easy to trick ourselves into thinking like, oh, well, like I sat down today, I opened my laptop, and now I'm going to knock out emails and feel like we're producing something. But in reality, we're just like cleaning out the trash. Like it's not really actually producing anything of value that you're going to be proud of at the end of the day. So with Eat the Frog, you're sort of going ahead and taking that and saying, this is going to make me feel good if I get this piece done.
Yeah. And it also leverages something else, right? It's the start of your day. Even if I go into, let's say, email, and I promise myself it's just going to be half an hour, even I fulfill that promise, which is hard, I will be kind of like thinking about the things I read and what's happening behind the scenes. Well, if I just get here fresh in the morning, ready to work, honestly, usually that's not a lot of my mind yet, because I'm not yet connected to the hive mind, right? So I can focus better. And I guess there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of discipline in how they, create boundaries for their work and all the things that they do. But I need to set myself up for success, because my mind can race and spend the whole day just thinking about all of the interesting discussions we're having about work, and then not actually doing the work itself.
Yeah. God, that's so true for me. I can definitely be one of those that will trick myself. Like if I don't set up some barriers, and I'm fortunate I work at a productivity company. So I've gotten better at this over the last 5 or 6 years. But like without those systems in place, like I can tell myself I'm really disciplined and I'll get in there and I'll do it tomorrow. But in reality, like I need a system. I need some sort of system. And so I think it can be helpful for even the most structured of people to kind of like rethink how they're going about it.
Yeah. Do you know when I noticed how I missed the system? When I come back from time off, obviously I prioritize communication more because a lot of stuff happened behind the scenes. There's people blocked on something from me. So for a few days I go in and prioritize that first. But it's really, really hard to get anything done doing that. And I find myself snowballing tasks, right? Like every day postponed to the next day. And then suddenly it becomes very unwieldy and it hits me, maybe I should be doing, my P1 first, then the P2, then the P3, and then everything else can come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious about something that I know about you personally, and I hope you don't mind sharing. Is because we've been using this sort of scenario so far, talking about like coming in the morning and tackling your P1 in the morning. So that's kind of assuming that everybody starts their work at 8 or 9 a.m. and that's when you should tackle your frog. But I happen to know that you are by nature, at least, a night owl and prefer to work different hours. So can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on like the way you prefer to work hours wise and how you'd like to eat the frog in that sense? And then maybe how that's adapted due to life circumstances.
Yeah. So I'm definitely a night owl. I'm unsure if frogs are out at night. Probably not. So maybe this metaphor doesn't work anymore. But yeah, I'm definitely a night owl. And actually, I would describe myself maybe as an extreme night owl. My preferred schedule is definitely, midday, 1 p.m. all the way to 4 or 5 a.m. Actually, that block from midnight to 4 or 5 a.m. is by far my most productive on a natural basis. But life gets in the way, and I have kids. I do take my oldest to school myself, so I need to get up early and just do the family routine like most other people, actually. So for a few years I'll be fighting against my natural rhythm, but actually that's fine in terms of Eat the Frog, because I feel like another thing that I think it's really simple about Eat the Frog is that maybe it's not as connected to your own energy levels as some other productivity methods. It's literally first thing you do in the day. Maybe your day starts at 9 a.m. like mine now, or like at 2 p.m. like before, right? But it's about doing that first. So I know there are some other methods, and honestly, I've used them in the past, where you have to understand what are your time, your peak times, when you are the most productive, when you are the most energetic. Try to schedule specific things for those times, and so on. Again, Eat the Frog. It's such a simple and beautiful method. Get into work, pick the priority one task, do that. Move on when you're done. Yeah. So
yeah, you have no excuses not to get it done, because it's just like all we're asking you to do is pick one thing and just do it.
Yeah, one thing. Come on, man. It's like the least I could ask myself, right? So
and you don't have to like map out like, okay, on Tuesdays at 4 I really have high energy, so I should put it for that. Like you don't have to think about these things. You just say, I'm going to do my number one as soon as I get started. So that's the thing to clear up. Some people have a misconception that like it's supposed to be a morning thing or something, but it's when you start your day. So when you get started, before doing anything else, you eat your frog.
Yeah. Exactly. Get the big boulder out of the way. Yep.
It probably would be cool if you don't mind. I think you're okay sharing your Todoist and kind of showing us how this looks, right?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I was preparing for this. I didn't complete any tasks today, so that I did complete 4 tasks. I don't know which ones were there, but so that you could see my plan for the day, right? So you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
All right. So this is what I would call a typical today list for me. So, obviously there's some tasks with times that are at the top, but otherwise you can definitely see my P1, P2, and P3. They're there, red, orange, blue. And these are the things I started the day with. Yeah, I drafted a document about metrics for our engineering organization. That was the first thing I did. It involved some research, drafting, editing, and then sharing with the team. I did draft a quarterly engineering update that I'll be sharing soon. So that was the second thing I did. And the third thing I did was exploring GitHub API for some of the things we want to do internally with support. So that was more of a coding task. And truth is, I did the metrics document first before doing anything else. I didn't even open email. Then I cheated a little bit, opened Twist. Luckily, there was not a lot of movement. So, after a few minutes, I was back working on the draft for the quarterly update. And then again, went to email and Twist, and finally explored the GitHub API. So after all of these were done, I did everything else that's on this list. So everything here is done. I'm just leaving it open so that others can see. But I think the key point here is that I did the P1 task before anything else. I didn't even give a chance to myself to get distracted. And on a better day than today, I would, move on to the P2, the orange task, the draft quarterly engineering update, even before doing anything else. So I would do 1, 2, 3 before doing anything else. That's not what I did today, but I'm already satisfied with getting one out of the way.
We appreciate the authenticity.
And for tomorrow, I can actually have already thought a little bit about my day tomorrow, and you can see there is a pattern here, right? So again, 1, 2, 3. This is the first thing I'm going to do when I get here, tomorrow morning, like round up loose ends from the resilience squad and figure out the next steps, make notes. So that's the very first thing I'm going to do. Then I'm going to write a role description for my role. So that's something else, randomly that needs to get done. And there's the GitHub Q&A thing that we're going to do internally. Hopefully I'll do all of these before ever, doing any of the others here. And I was already forced to figure out what these are, right? Like the P1, P2, and P3. And sometimes it's not obvious, and we already discussed this. I don't use a very strong system to decide, but I have decided these are my decisions. Yeah.
That's half the battle, is just like making the decision. Maybe that's some good advice, is like, don't overanalyze if you're trying to pick between your P1 and your P2, like, just make one of them your P1 and move on. Like, you don't need to overanalyze it.
Yeah, absolutely. The decision part is super important. Also helps me be honest about what is really important for me in my role or something that I really want to get done on a personal level. So it's a really great exercise for sure.
One question I was going to ask you is, if you can go back up to your draft metrics document. You mentioned that it had like a couple different bits to it, like research and editing and things. So how do you handle tasks that could be broken down into multiple tasks if they've got different phases, or especially like some things where maybe you're waiting on something from someone else? Like, how do you manage this, I guess, from a priority standpoint and an organizational standpoint in your Todoist?
So I really try to keep things reasonable. Like if let's say my frog is so big that it doesn't fit in a day, that's a really bad frog. I try to slice that frog up into multiple bits. So the thing I try to do is make sure I have at least a little bit of room for everything else. So usually somewhere between 2 hours, half a day would be the maximum, the upper end, let's say, of a task here. So actually the research that I had to do for this metrics document, I had already started. I've been reading books on this and blog posts like for a while. So it's been kind of like a research theme for a little while. But if not, I would definitely be breaking these down into subtasks, right? And just take them one at a time, maybe one today, one tomorrow, and so on, until I was ready to actually build that last, that draft document.
Gotcha. So you wouldn't have subtasks under draft metrics document, for instance, and no research no. Okay.
I would definitely I maybe I'll have that in the project, right? So maybe if I went to the project, I could have the structure. But for the date, something with the date, I would just put the date on the task for today, because again, like this is all about focus, right? So I want to have the least amount of things here so that I can focus on the thing at hand and get it done. So I would rather not see that whole structure, especially if that's my frog. I just want to see the frog.
I see. Okay. All right. Great. Perfect. I'm seeing we got questions coming in from various different platforms and stuff here. So but we will get to those in just a minute. All right, great. Let's see. So I'm trying to think through this from my standpoint. It's interesting. So I don't use Eat the Frog, but I do have almost a very similar setup in theory, and I'm questioning myself on if I should make this rule, because I'm an early riser, but my energy levels aren't really at the highest first thing in the morning. So I have the same process as you. I have a 1P1, 1P2, 1P3. Sometimes I cheat and give myself a second P3 if I'm being honest, but generally I try to. Generally, yes.
Okay, that's great. That's great.
I am good about making sure that if I'm going to prioritize a P3, that I better really make sure I get my P1 and P2 done. But what I don't do is I don't tackle the P1 first. Normally it is a frog, and I say like, okay, I'm gonna get to that, but like I wake up really early, like 5-6 a.m. and sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like doing that at 6:30 a.m. I'm gonna say I'm gonna wait until 10. Usually I still get it done, but occasionally it keeps getting pushed. I let myself get distracted by other things, and it keeps getting pushed back. So this has inspired me a little bit to like, maybe I just really need to just eat that frog and just get it over with.
I think the key here is that if you look at your P1 as, if I do this today and I do it well, I'm going to be satisfied for the day. That's the balance I think we need to strike. I know that's kind of like a bit Zen even, but that's the key, because then you will be compelled to do that, because you will see that like, this is my big piece of work for the day. This is my, the value that I'm creating. Everything else is a bonus, right?
Yeah.
So it can be hard, I know, and we need to be demanding with ourselves and we want to do more, but that's also the beauty of figuring out what the P1 is. What is the thing that I will do today or tomorrow, let's say, that would have me satisfied for the rest of the day? So yeah, I think it's I would recommend trying this out for sure.
Yeah. You've inspired me. I'm going to, because I've known in the back of my head, like I'm putting that off, and mainly because I don't want to have to eat the frog right away, but I'm going to be happier if I go ahead and knock it out. So
yeah, but listen, we're all different. The reason I asked you about the 2 P3s was because at some point I tried a slightly different approach, which was I had 1 P1, 2 P2s, 3 P3s, kind of like a tree structure.
Yep.
I would just postpone stuff all the time. I would never get around to the P3s, and then it became very dishonest. Like not dishonest, but I'm very proud that I do the P1 every day, right? Like, and that's kind of like a strike. Like I don't fail. This never fails, and everything else also almost never fails. And when I had more, I would genuinely almost always fail at something. So I didn't have that strike feeling of getting it done consistently. So hence my question, like that didn't work for me, but it works for you. So maybe you don't need to eat the biggest frog first, because you just always end up eating it anyway, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for me personally. So yeah,
it's good to know, like different strokes for different folks, sort of thing. And sometimes I think it's probably best to live within these systems have been created, and tried in a lot of different ways, and like people swear by them. So it probably is good to stay within the confines, but I like to think there's some room for editing a little bit for individuals as well. Like this process that I have does kind of work for me, because I kind of like warm up the brain with a P3. I think of it as like stretching before the run kind of, and then I'm like ready to go into a sprint. So
yeah, I mean, and I really believe that. Like, I mean, you know me, I'm not a very process heavy person. To be honest, I was using Eat the Frog without knowing the name. So I kind of came up with the system on the go, and then read about it. I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I do. So
same. Yeah, I was the same. The system that I'm using, this 1P1, 1P2, 2 P3s at the most, was something I came up with. And then I saw our blog post about it, and I was like, oh, we this has a name. I'm not eating the whole frog. I'm taking little bites here and there, but still. So I have a question coming in. It says, can you talk more about the Eat the Frog with P1, P2, P3? So basically, and this person says, I use Carl Pouline's 2+8 time sector system. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that or not.
I am not.
Okay. So we may need to get a little more context on that, but in general, let's we're using some internal terminology with this P1, P2, P3 thing. So maybe you can share your Todoist again and show
absolutely.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. That's true. Actually, a great call out. So the thing about Todoist is that we have priority levels for tasks. We have 4. So, when you create a task, oh, actually, this is not what I want.
I will say, I'll interject real quick, and I'll say I think I might be wrong, but I think Carl refers to them as flags as well. I might be wrong, but so he might be saying red flag, orange flag, something like that. But yeah, we say P1, P2, P3 internally.
Yeah. We use these flags as just priority levels. So when I say that I have one P1, one P2, one P3, it's basically saying that I flag the most important task for the day, the second most important task for the day, and the third most important task for the day, and try to do them in that order. The first one always gets done first. The others, I need more discipline, but that's the plan, getting them done in order. So that's what I mean by P1, P2, and P3. And you can see this reflected up here. This is the P1, the red flag, P2, orange flag, and the P3, blue flag.
Yep. And then everything else falls into the P4. And you in theory can have as many P1s, as many P2s, P3s as you want. Gonçalo's approach, and happens to be mine too, is to try to limit it. Like, I kind of take the mentality, you can't have more than one priority, like top priority. Like, there's only one P1, like you can't if you have 2 P1s, then one of them is not actually the number one priority. So that's the mindset I take. But I know people that have Todoist projects with every single task is prioritized. Yep.
That is, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That doesn't work for me. But yeah, that's a great question. And if you can provide some more feedback on Carl's 2+8 time sector system, we might be able to address that for you. So sorry, we're not so familiar with that bit.
As said, like I'm not a process heavy person, so actually, I don't tend to study these a lot. I find something that works and then try to stick to it. And this is actually what happened with Eat the Frog.
Yeah. How much? A couple people have alluded to this in different ways, and so it might help just to kind of wrap it up into one question. And you already sort of touched on it, but like, generally speaking, how much time are you investing in a P1, in a P2, in a P3, just to give someone some frame for like you mentioned, maybe a P1 at the most is like half a day. Would that be the same for a P2, or like I don't know, what would be the norm in that case?
That is a good question. So I don't aim for kind of like an average duration for these. What I try to do is cap them. So make sure they are not too big. But sometimes my P1 is a 5-minute thing. Sometimes it's a 10-minute thing, and the same for others. The thing that I try to do is just keep them realistic. And what do I mean by realistic? I mean that, a day has 8 hours, and I do have to check email at some point. So if something, if a task takes 9 hours, then it's not a good candidate to even be a task for me. So, and that applies to P1, P2, and P3. So let's say that I want to be honest about my workload. I want to be honest about, my schedule. Let's say I'm going to work 8 hours. What I try to do is make sure that the expected duration of all of these does not add up to something insane, right? So if I will maybe cap a P1 at 4 hours, but that also means that if I have that on the list, I will try to make sure that the other 2 are kind of like on the smaller side to leave room for everything. So again, it's not a rigid system. I do not have tasks that are longer than that usually, because that just needs to be broken down by principle. But otherwise, that's sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 2 hours, and that's okay.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So it's not so much about the individual task. You're more looking at the total time allotment that you have for the day and how these frogs can fit into that time that you have left.
Yeah. Again, I don't try to fit the frogs into a box. So again, I know there are some really cool productivity systems where you are incentivized to break tasks down into, buckets of duration and so on. I don't do any of that. So just try to keep it reasonable and realistic, and then and just follow the system.
Cool. And do you use this like that kind of brings me to a question that I've seen. Do you use it in conjunction with any other systems that you just said you're not really process oriented, but like for instance, like time blocking or Pomodoro or anything like that? Like, or is it pretty straight, keep it simple, stupid kind of thing?
Keep it simple, stupid kind of thing. So something that I will mention, I fast. And fasting is like the best focus system for me. Like when I am fasting, I just get this insane boost in focus. And so, yeah, I mean, it's weird. This is not what you asked, but I don't use Pomodoro or time blocking or anything like that because 90% of the times, if I'm fasting, I'm super focused for hours at a time. So that really, really works for me. And yeah, in the spirit of honesty that I mentioned before, in the rare occasions I feel really unproductive, I will just be upfront about it and go take a walk instead of trying to force myself to, no, I need to finish this. It's more like, no, I'm going to take a walk, get some fresh air, maybe listen to a podcast, and, get back and try again in an hour. So just not let things linger. Yeah.
Nice. What about, some people are interested in knowing how you set yourself up for success next day, and then on top of that, like how far out are you planning your frogs?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. So most of the work that I do is planned the day before. So that's realistically, that's it. By the end of the day, I look at the stuff that I have to do, maybe a few days in advance, and then move things around and plan the next day really well. Like this is my P1, P2, P3, and so on. Sometimes on Sunday, by the end of the day, I just have a look at my week to see what kind of like big things are incoming, just to have them, in my mind on a high level, and then just go back to the planning day by day again. Other than this, honestly, I don't have a very strict system. Sometimes when we're all trying to improve all the time, right? So when sometimes I have goals for myself that on a more, quarterly, yearly basis, and there are some tasks that are related with those goals that come up. Mm-hmm. But, those are usually just, times, I want to do this sometime in Q2. So I will set a date in Q2. And when it comes around the day before, let's say, I will see, is it appropriate to do it tomorrow or should I schedule it for a future date? And yeah, so the real focus, the real energy that I put out, it's usually on a day-to-day basis.
Gotcha. Okay. So it would be correct. I think it's a key. I think it could be really important for Eat the Frog to set yourself up the day before, like have a look ahead to the day before. Don't come in the morning when you're groggy-eyed and haven't had a sip of your coffee and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick this as my P1 today. Like, yes, have it set up the day before.
Yeah, because then you're already doing things that are not your P1, right? Like exactly. Just figuring out what to do is a task in itself. So, that's not the frog.
Exactly. You could actually have a task, a reoccurring task to, like set your frogs for tomorrow or something like that. And that could be the last thing you do before leaving for the day before. Could be helpful.
Yeah, actually, I don't do that, and I should. So
you got to give yourself credit for that, man. You're doing it every day. Yeah. It's karma points.
Yeah, I'm losing karma points. Yes. Damn it.
These are freebies.
Yes.
And so how about throughout the day? Let's say, you've got your day planned. You've got your 3 frogs lined up on a Tuesday. You wake up and then ideally you're not going to come across anything that would tell you, that you need to change that up. But do you ever make changes, or do you ever kind of have to shuffle on the fly?
Yeah, sometimes. Like the P1, never, because that's the thing. I never give myself the chance to be distracted by something else. Since I don't open anything else, no email, no twist, nothing. I don't even know if something comes up that would tell me you shouldn't be doing this anymore. I don't even know. And that's a trade-off I'm willing to take just to have the peace of mind and extreme focus on that task. So, however, as I said before, sometimes I don't jump immediately to the P2 and P3, especially if the P1 task is big and kind of like, there's a lot of effort in it. Sometimes I do take a break and go do smaller stuff. And sometimes that will pull me into some rabbit hole, or I will learn something about the other stuff that I have to do. And then in the end of the day, I will just have to reschedule and restructure my day. So, but I guess the most important point was what we were discussing before. I think to do Eat the Frog well, you can't allow yourself to be distracted, early in the day. So that P1 needs to get done. So, just play with the information you had from the day before. By the end of the day, take that, focus on the task and do it. Because I think if something can come up, it means you're not truly focused, right? So
yeah.
Save
yourself from yourself a little bit, or protect yourself from yourself a little bit, because we will get distracted. Like we'll allow ourselves to be distracted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you avoid meetings in the mornings then, I imagine?
I do.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have almost no meetings in the morning. Most of them are after lunch.
Some good advice that I got a while back, and I think it's worth passing on in this context, is we do have control over our calendars, right? Like, you're the CTO of the company. A lot of people, quote unquote, need access to you. But like, if you're eating frogs in the morning, you don't have time to till every other Tuesday have a meeting and have that mess up your whole system. So I think it's important to remember, we can control when we're available more than we kind of tend to think we can. If we're available all the time, it kind of goes along with what you said before. Like, if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And if you're always available, then you're never really available. And it can be good.
And I think it's really important for people to be available, actually. But, we have an asynchronous culture. So there are many ways of, there are times to be available and times to be doing deep work, being focused. And I think we have an amazing team that kind of really respects and expects people to be not fully available all the time. That's just not the culture we're trying to create. And I think that's very important if we want to have, an impact and do impactful work. So,
yeah. Yeah, a little trick I can recommend is especially if you use some tool like Calendly or some calendar training. A lot of people watching this are not necessarily working in asynchronous cultures. Just we're on one end of the spectrum there. So, or they have to work with clients a lot or something like that. And you can, one concept that I've used is blocking off on my calendar, a 2 or 3 hour period where it's just people can't book times during that block. And so if I know that's the time for me to get my P1 done, I'll make sure nobody's going to interrupt me during that time.
Yeah. And I was going to, mention that for people who are calendar heavy, it makes perfect sense to just have, the deep work blocks over there. It's not empty space, right? So
yeah, exactly. Somebody has asked, so this is a really good point. So if you're eating your frog first thing in the morning, how can you define first thing? Because you've woken up, you've had breakfast, you've maybe showered, you've taken your kid to school, you've done a lot of things actually. And often these are things on people's to-do list as well. Some people will have every little thing on there. So I don't know if you have any advice to share with someone is this, you think about this in the context of work strictly?
Yeah. I think about this in the context of work strictly. So obviously, getting up, showering, having breakfast, taking my kid to school. So when I talk about the first thing, it's the first thing after I sit down and open the lid on my laptop. And even I have made coffee at that time even. So it's not the very first thing in the day. It's the first work related thing that I do. So yeah, absolutely. It's not literally the first thing. I wake up and start eating my P1 frog. No. I mean, the first thing that I do when I sit down to work. Yeah.
You're missing so many karma points, actually. I mean, making coffee, taking the kid to school, waking up, showering, getting dressed.
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing I'm enlightened already. So
you've been at this a while.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, there is one question, if you could share your screen again real quick, about the filter and labels.
Yeah.
There's lots of questions coming in about this. Do we want to address?
I think, folks from the product team would prefer to address this themselves. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we're always experimenting internally. Not everything we do goes out into production. A lot of the things we do. A lot of the things that we are trying out internally are refined before they actually get to users. So you're seeing my Todoist, which means you're seeing what our internal builds look like. So this doesn't mean anything. It can mean something. Depends. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer because this is non-committal in any way. It's just an internal build. As I'm sure everybody watching this understands, we see a lot of things that are in progress at all times. So yeah. Sometimes it's hard to remember what Todoist looks like for everybody who's not in on all the little things happening. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're always pushing forward with products and trying to make them better on a day-to-day basis. So something like this might come.
Yeah. We're not committing to anything here today, full disclaimer, but that's true. I mean, we're constantly iterating on the product, and actually like every aspect of the business is constantly being tested and showing different views and different emails and different landing pages. So at any given time, it looks very different. It's hard for us to remember that sometimes, I think.
Yeah. But also like we do have mechanisms for everybody who wants in on things earlier. We have beta programs and so on across platforms. I highly recommend those. Sometimes things are a little bit less polished and stable than the final version, but for everybody who's eager to see, maybe this is in beta. Actually, I'm not fully aware, so apologies for that.
It shows you where we're at. Yeah, no problem. There is one last question that I would like to get to before we sign off here. It's hard to believe the time flies by with these things. But so for someone with ADHD, would you be able to offer any advice on how to manage or avoid distractions? Maybe how Eat the Frog could assist with that. And like kind of the crux of the question is like, how do you remember to regroup after being distracted? I think is really in the core of the question. Yeah.
So I'm probably not the most equipped to answer this because I do have some ease to focus, fortunately. So, but there is something I did try before, which I think could be applicable, which is to have a filter where you only see your frog. So you can create a Todoist filter that's like today and priority 1, and set that as your start page. And that means Todoist will only show this task when you open it in the morning. So you're kind of like eliminating everything else from the screen, especially if you use Todoist, in the smaller version. I can show my screen again to kind of like make the point.
And maybe you can also show where someone can set the different home screen.
Yes, I can definitely do that. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
So the thing that I was referring to is that if I do this is the only task that I see, right? Like I can set up a filter that looks exactly like this. These are just shorthands. You can write info like today and priority. If Todoist is used in a small window, it gets even better, less things on screen even. And then let's say I call this today focus. All right. I call this filter today focus. I can go here. Let me make it bigger again. It's just easier. I can go here and set today focus as my home view, right? Which means, and by the way, I'm cheating because I didn't actually create a filter. So this is a filter I already have. So when I reopen Todoist, I can't do that actually because I'm sharing Todoist in my screen. But when I do, it will just open in this screen already. So that's it. Just going to settings, general, setting a new home view. And I don't know if this is good advice, but at least in terms of reducing distractions, I think it might help not to see everything at once. Maybe you can switch back into the regular today view after you eat your frog and then allow yourself to be distracted because again, you've already eaten your frog, right? So it should be okay to be distracted now. But that's it. That's something I would recommend at least trying out.
I think that's really good advice. I would love to hear from the viewer who sent that in. If you try that and it works or doesn't work, please give us some feedback through our support team or through our community where we are very invested in trying to help everybody be more productive in from whatever place you're coming from, and certainly like if ADHD is a struggle for you, then we want to help create methods and make the tool as applicable to that as possible. So yeah, please provide the feedback on that and let us know how it goes. I think that's an awesome place to wrap it up. We could probably go on for a good bit longer, but we've eaten enough frogs, and this is really helpful. I learned a lot myself. I'm sure others did too. Do you want to share anything else, Gonçalo? Did we get to everything you wanted to, or miss anything?
No, I'm actually quite surprised. I thought when we said, let's chat about Eat the Frog, I thought, it's kind of like go in, do the first thing, most important thing first thing in the morning. What's there to it? So, and we've been here for 45 minutes. So it's been pretty cool. I appreciate all the questions, actually. This even makes me think further about the system that I'm using. But if one last bit about this is, I think Eat the Frog could be a really good system for folks who are not as process oriented as, like me, because it's just so simple, right? Like pick one thing, do that. You don't even have to take it as far as I do and have three things. You can just have one. So for everybody who doesn't use a system and is overwhelmed by how complicated things can get, like GTD, there's just a lot of stuff out there that you need to read, a lot of stuff just to get started. This is a great system because that's it. You can summarize it in a sentence, like pick the most important task and do that first. That's it. So yeah, highly recommended for beginners like me into productivity methods. Yep.
Beginners like the CTO at a to-do list productivity company.
Well, yeah, but it's true. It's true in terms of process.
True,
yeah, I just follow the most simple thing. So
I have to say real quick on that note, it is funny because in a lot of ways I can totally relate. Like I for instance, I've not adopted GTD. There's these advanced methodologies of productivity, which I think are great. They serve tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, and that's awesome. It is funny, because of where we work, people tend to think we know all of these methods in and out, and we probably use them all, and some of us do, some of us don't. But at the core, what we're all about is getting things done in a more efficient manner, balancing your life better and figuring out ways to be able to mix work and play and live a more relaxed, more balanced life. So hopefully this helps some of the people viewing to give it a try and see if it helps you achieve that. And we hope it does.
Absolutely. For me, Todoist is my second brain. Even if I don't use a very complex productivity system, I don't think I could work today without it, to be honest. There's just so much stuff in here that I took off of my head, but I know it's somewhere and it will come around. So it's just peace of mind and productivity. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Gonçalo. Great to see you. Great to be able to catch up. And I learned a little bit here today, and looks like from the comments coming in, a lot of people did as well. So appreciate the time.
No, I had a great time. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks.